In our last section about circles, we're going to talk about the equations of circles and how they are graphed and how we can find the center and the radius just by looking at their equation. So at the top of your notes, you've got this equation of a circle, and it's the standard, which means it's how everyone writes it, and just by looking at it, we can gather information. But all you really need to understand from this whole lesson is that the center will always be at h, k, and then the r represents the radius. So the standard equation is always this: x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals the radius squared. So let's compare that to the first example we have down here. If I just write x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals the radius squared, I can see how everything lines up. The h term is 1 because it's x minus h, and I'm taking x minus 1. So h in this particular equation is 1. K is a little bit tricky. K and 6 line up, but the equation says it's supposed to be y minus k. So technically y plus 6 is y minus a negative 6. So my k in this equation is a negative 6. And then the r squared lines up with 16. So if r squared equals 16, if I were to square root both sides real quick, I would get that r is equal to 4. These are the three numbers that I'm interested in: h, k, and r. So the center of my circle is going to be 1, negative 6, and the radius is going to be 4. And I get that information very quickly just by looking at it. So let's look at another example. Find the center and the radius of the circle with this equation. Well, again, for the first couple of times you're doing this, you might want to write down the equation of a circle: x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals the radius squared. So you can match up the numbers. So at first you're thinking, well, I'm not subtracting anything from x, it's just x squared. Well, that's exactly right. That's like x minus 0 or nothing squared. So your h in this particular example is 0. And then you can clearly see that you are subtracting 4 from the y, so your k value, or the y coordinate of your center, is 4. And then the 20 lines up with the r squared, so if r squared is 20, that means the radius is the square root of 20, which is simplified to 2 root 5. So there's my radius. And then my center is always h comma k. So the center of this circle is at 0 comma 4. Very quick. As you get the hang of this, you might be able to do the next example by saying, oh, I'm subtracting nothing from x, so my center is 0. Nothing from y, so it's 0, 0. And if r squared is 144, that means the radius is 12. So in a matter of seconds, I know where the center of this circle is at and how big the radius is. But what if you get something like x squared plus y squared minus 2x plus 4y minus 20? That is not in standard form, so you can't just look at it and go, oh, the center's negative 2 and 4, because that's not how the equation works. It's supposed to be x minus something squared plus y minus something squared equals the radius squared. So we need to do a little bit of algebra to rearrange this so that it's in that form. So what I've done is I've put that over on this page so I can show you more clearly what I'm doing. To turn something into x minus something squared, the strategy is to complete the square. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all the x's together, like x squared and then minus my 2x, and then I'm going to leave a blank because I need to complete the square by putting a number in there so I'll be able to factor this. Then I'll do the same thing with the y's, plus y squared plus 4y, and I'll leave a blank. But I'm going to go ahead and add the 20 to the other side, so all the numbers without variables are on the right side of the equation, just like the radius always is. So I need to put a number into this blank to figure out what it would be squared. So the strategy is this: what number plus itself would give me that negative 2? Well, that would be a negative 1 plus a negative 1. Well, a negative 1 times a negative 1 is positive 1, so that's what's going to fill in my blank. So if you look at this trinomial right here, x squared minus 2x plus 1, that's the same thing as taking x minus 1 times x minus 1. And if you're taking that quantity times itself, that's like saying x minus 1 squared. So we have figured out what that quantity squared with x is going to be. That's what we want. So we're going to do the same thing with y. I look at the middle number and I say, well, what plus itself would have made 4? Well, 2 plus 2 is 4. But 2 times 2, well, that's also 4. That's what needs to complete the perfect square. Because now this trinomial, y squared plus 4y plus 4, is factorable, whereas before it was not. This is the same thing as y plus 2 times y plus 2. That's why we ask ourselves, what number would add up with itself to make that middle term? Well, that's the same thing as y plus 2 squared. So I've got my center. It's going to be x minus 1 squared plus y plus 2 squared. So my center is going to be 1, negative 2. Now remember, it's negative 2 because technically we're thinking of this as y minus a negative 2 whenever it's a plus. And you're going to be very tempted to say that your radius is simply the square root of 20, but it's not. When we completed the square, we added this 1 to the left side of the equation so we would be able to factor it. And we added this 4 to the left side of the equation so we would be able to factor it. Well, like all equations, if you add numbers to one side, you have to add the exact same numbers to the other side. So I should have added a plus 1 and a plus 4 to the other side, which would have turned this equal to 25. And that number is what's going to equal my radius squared. So if the radius squared is 25, my radius is simply 5. So my goal is to rewrite it in standard form so I can look at it and go, oh, the center is 1, negative 2 with a radius of 5. Let me show you another example just like that. So we've got x squared plus y squared minus 6x plus 12y minus 4 equals 0. Again, if you have x's and y's in there, not just x minus something squared, you're going to have to do some algebra. So let me show you how I would do that. What I like to do is organize myself first. I'm going to do this one a little bit faster because you've got the idea. X squared minus 6x, and I'm going to fill in the blank so I can factor it, plus y squared plus 12y plus blank, because I'm going to fill that in and factor it. That's going to equal 4 plus blank plus blank. I like to put the blanks in there to remind myself that if I add two things to the left side of the equation, I'm going to have to add two things to the right side of the equation. So now the rest is very simple. I need to say x minus something squared and y minus something squared equals a new number. Again, what plus itself makes negative 6? Well, that would be negative 3 plus negative 3. But negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. So this is like x minus 3 times x minus 3, which is x minus 3 squared. You're starting to notice after several of these that you're going to have a pattern. Whatever number you say adds to itself to make that middle number is the number that's going to go inside of your parentheses. Or in other words, that middle number divided by 2 is going to be your center. So I'm going to use that technique on the next one. 6 plus 6, or 12 divided by 2, is what would add with itself to make 12. So the number that goes in my parentheses, 12 divided by 2, is a positive 6. Now it's positive because the 12 was positive. But 6 times 6 is 36. And while it's not too important to have the 9 and the 36 written there, you need to understand that what we're doing is saying, yeah, y plus 6 times y plus 6 would be equal to that whole thing, y squared plus 12y plus 36. But what I've been trying to get to is the x minus 3 squared plus the y plus 6 squared. I know right now that my center is 3, negative 6. But this is why I put the blanks in. You'd be very tempted to say the radius is 2, but it's not. We added 9 to the left side of the equation so we could factor, and we added 36. So we have to add 9 and 36 to the right. So 4 plus 9 plus 36 is 49. So here's the standard form of the equation. X squared plus x minus 3 squared plus y plus 6 squared equals 49. So the radius is 7, because 7 squared would be 49. So the goal is to put it into standard form so I can continue to find the center and the radius very quickly.